All right, so I'm here with Matthew Byrne. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Anders.
I'm really happy to finally be able to speak to you because I'm a big fan, as I've told you.
That's
before.
nice to hear. Yeah. You mentioned that on Instagram a few times, and I was kind of thinking, how did this guy discover me?
Yeah,
We tend to forget our music travels so far,
yeah. And I was actually trying to remember that, like, how did I actually discover your music? And I think it was through the wonders of the Spotify algorithm, actually, through some playlist.
Yeah.
But you know how it is. Like sometimes, like there's so much music in our lives now, but sometimes you hear a song or a piece of music that you instantly connect with.
Right.
And I think that whichever song I heard from you was one of those songs, and I had to dig deeper, and I discovered your other albums. And as I said, I'm a big fan.
Great. That's awesome.
I kind of have like a weak spot for that whole Irish Celtic folk song tradition, which you're a part of in a way.
Absolutely, yeah.
So yeah, I'm always glad to discover new artists in that sort of world.
Right.
And I find that your album has a really solid production as well that I'm really digging. So
Thank you very much.
I'm curious to hear more about that.
Yeah.
Maybe the most important thing I think that I connected with when it comes to your music is I find that you're a great storyteller when it comes to folk songs.
Thank you. That's the most important. That's kind of where it all starts for me.
Yeah, okay, that's interesting to hear.
Storytelling
that
first, and then
at
everything else after.
Yeah,
and
great.
And it's kind of I didn't always focus on that in my, and I hate to use this word, but you'll know what I mean, in my branding or in my kind of promotional whatever. I didn't really emphasize the storytelling factor as much until I guess it was probably 2 or 3 years ago when I realized getting feedback from people and kind of getting audience, having people say similar things to exactly what you just said, which is I love the storytelling. And I realized that that's what drew me to it first and foremost when I kind of all boiled it down. And that's what was drawing audiences to it was just the general, it's just part of human nature, I think, is our love of stories.
Yeah.
Everybody across every language and every culture loves stories, and they don't have to be true, but or they don't have to be, necessarily historically accurate or whatever. But, there's a love of stories, which is kind of it's to me like the love of storytelling is part of the human condition, and sure. And I was doing this before for a few years before I realized that, and then it was my realization of that which made me realize, okay, I'm Matthew Byrne, storyteller, storyteller, guitar player, traditional singer, storyteller, guitar player. But I started to kind of build that into the way I put myself out there, and I'm glad I did, because it became clearer to people what I was doing. It wasn't just some guy who was just singing random songs. I was telling stories, and exactly. Stories that I happen to have a connection to. And of course, that's another thing we can talk about. But yeah, so when you say the storytelling thing, it's kind of like it's always vindication for me to hear that because it's important to me.
Great. So this is definitely something I want to like drill a bit deeper into, but. Before we do that, could you maybe just quickly, for people who aren't already familiar with you, just introduce yourself, where you're from, how you got into music, perhaps?
Right.
Just
so
your own words.
I'm a traditional singer, storyteller, guitar player, and bouzouki player from Newfoundland on the far east coast of Canada. So Newfoundland is the most easterly point in North America, and it's an island in the middle of the Atlantic, and in a lot of ways, geographically, we're a lot closer to Europe and to the kind of the Celtic world, and culturally and historically, we're a lot closer as well, considering that we only became a Canadian province in 1949, which is relatively recently. So for that reason, the music and the songs and the musical styles in Newfoundland are a lot more English and Irish and Scottish, and in certain flavors of Scandinavian, I'm sure, and French. they're a lot more of all of that than they are Canadian, really, because we're a new Canadian province, and the Canadianness in the Newfoundland identity is a fairly new thing when you think about it. And so so much of the music that I sing as a traditional singer and as a lover of traditional songs and those kind of that repertoire kind of comes from the old world, it was stuff that was brought over to Newfoundland when people came to Newfoundland in the 1700s and 1800s. They came from England and Ireland predominantly. These were fishing ships that came to first prosecute a fishery which was seasonal, and then these people started to stay, and these people brought their music with them. And so the music, so much of the traditional music repertoire that I draw on as a performer is kind of it's historically kind of drawn from more from where you are than where I am,
Yeah.
And so that's interesting because that place is Newfoundland, interestingly, in a kind of an in between place where it's obviously a Canadian, it's part of the Canadian folk music world, but it's very much historically part of the English and the Irish and the Scottish tradition. And so it's a real melting pot of traditional music that it's hard to put your finger on, And so I was born into a family of many singers and traditional music lovers, and my parents were singers and song finders, and there's a lot of singing, there's a lot of folk music, traditional singing and song sharing that goes way back in my family, in my extended family. And so so much of the family influence over my repertoire is that's what's guided all of my recordings until now, and so the idea of my musical identity or my identity as a traditional singer through family is a big part of what I talk about in my show. So that's kind of what I do in a nutshell. Is that, I don't know if that's a nutshell. That's as close to a nutshell as I can make it, really.
Yeah. I'm also very bad at those elevator pitches.
Yeah.
But how's the music scene or the traditional music scene in Newfoundland these days? Is there like a thriving scene?
It's very, very vibrant. It's very vibrant. There's a lot of young people playing music now. There's more younger people playing traditional music now in Newfoundland, I think, than there are older people, and
really?
I'm sure that goes for a lot of places. But there's young fiddle groups, there's young sessions, there's young singers. It's a very vibrant scene, and it's great to see because I always talk about how, for me, like, I grew up surrounded by traditional music, and I had a love of traditional songs and traditional music when I was really young, and I had a love of it before it was kind of in.
Yeah.
And I remember being young in school, in junior high and in high school, and kind of, I was just enjoying it unto myself, and then all of a sudden, years later, you talk to these same people who you rub shoulders with back then, and they're into folk music, they're into Irish music, and they're playing in an Irish pub band, or they're going to sessions, and those are the same people who you were afraid to open up about it to
Yeah.
years ago.
Yeah, it seems to be a bit more in vogue these days. Like
yeah, it absolutely is. I think there's there's a whole lot of reasons for it. I don't know what the reasons are, and I'm sure everybody has their theories on that, but it really has become as much the domain of our generation and even younger.
and it's getting cool again in a way.
Yeah, and that's what I mean. Like I remember thinking when I was younger, when I was in school and listening to all of these like really nerdy trad records that my folks had, and I was keeping it. I wasn't mentioning anything about it because I was thinking, oh no, that's not what any of my contemporaries were listening to. And exactly. I mean, to think that there was a time, it's so hard now to picture in light of what it's become. It's so hard to picture a time when I was not open about it and when I was not as kind of, I don't know, proud or whatever you want to say, but it wasn't as cool at the time,
No,
it makes me feel old.
Yeah, let's not
I'm only
talk about
35,
that.
but
I'm 33, so
Yeah, it's and I mean, how long do we get to say that we're the young people doing it?
Yeah, like young and promising. I don't know how long.
I know. How long does that get part of our bio?
No, let's talk about something else.
Yeah.
But just to get back to the storytelling aspect of your music, as I said, that's really. I think that was the main thing that grabbed me with your music. In that I felt like you're not just singing the words in a pretty way; you're actually telling the story, and I can tell that you've been thinking a lot about the content of the song.
I find it so interesting when people say that, because I think about the songs, and I think about the story and how to deliver it, and I don't just think about it, I overthink it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I get obsessed about it. I love it that much that I really want to make sure that the story comes through. But I still don't know exactly what I'm doing to make that happen. I guess it's just a feeling of respect for the story that seems to get across in the way I record them and the way I put them on an album. You know, I don't know if you know but it seems like you kind of feel the same as me. It's that kind of like thing that you can't put your finger on, but you know it when you hear it. You know.
Yeah. But I mean, like I'm a big fan of folk songs for many reasons, but one of the biggest reasons, I think, that there's usually always a story, and maybe it's also something about it being an old story usually that's been passed on through the generations.
Yeah.
So, but how do you feel about, do you sometimes think it's strange to tell somebody else's story? Do you know what I mean? It's kind of different from like writing songs about your own emotional life, which is what most people do.
Yeah.
But as a folk singer, you're usually telling someone else's story, maybe?
Yeah. I don't find it weird now, because I've just been doing it for so long, and I'm comfortable with my ability to interpret a story that's not necessarily my own. I think I've always kind of seen being a traditional singer as no less legit, or no less of no less value than singer-songwriters. I feel like being the carrier of the message is important, and the way you can make somebody feel with a story. It doesn't necessarily have to be your own story. I've become very comfortable with my instincts when it comes to taking a traditional song and doing it justice. I always use that. I always kind of speak of it that way. Like, it's to me, there's something beautiful about a traditional song that makes it last through the generations. And I think there's something beautiful. There's something intrinsically beautiful about the turns of phrase, or the melody, or the combination, obviously, of the two, which allows it to kind of be loved by any across places and people through time. It allows it to last. It allows it to last in a way that that songs in the key of me, a friend of mine said that to me one time. He said, you're not just singing songs in the key of me, you're singing you're singing songs with meat on the bones, and songs that are stories that universal truths and all these kind of things. There's something about it that makes it last. And so I've always looked at it, I've always kind of taken those, and it starts with my love of it, whatever draws me to it, whether I'm drawn to the melody first, or the lyrical qualities, the interesting turns of phrase. It kind of starts with that, and I try to take what is intrinsically great about it, that I think has made it such a good song, that's made it survive, and I try to draw that out, and I think one of the things that I do, or that I'm careful to do, or I should say I'm careful not to do, is to get anything in the way of it. Like, I don't want to put too much in the way of the story. If it's a story, if it's a beautiful love story, or if it's a beautiful story of lovers reunited, or something like that, I don't want to get in the way of it with too much arrangement, or too much instrumentation, or too much harmony, or like I feel like this, just the telling of the story is first priority. You know what I mean? Like that's the first thing I want to get. That's the only thing I want to get right if I'm going to get something right. Yeah. Everything else should come underneath it. And so that for me, the guitar playing is a supporting role. And any instrumentation or any arrangement is just a supporting role. And there's a reason why I love singing unaccompanied songs, is because sometimes I feel like a song is just so damn good in its own right. It's so good with the melody and the storyline, or the melody and the turns of phrase are able to stand alone. And to me, like, showing that they can stand alone and they don't need anything added to it is kind of a challenge I like to rise to. And so yeah, it's not something that it is something that I'm comfortable with doing. I don't know if I mean, maybe there is something about growing up and hearing these songs and being surrounded by really good singers and noticing what they were doing, what made them a good singer, what made them be able to capture a room, what distinguished the good ones from the really good ones, And I really paid attention to the nuances of how those songs were delivered from a surprisingly early age, And so I think what happened then was, by the time I was in my teens and into my 20s, it was just an embedded understanding of it.
Yes,
like I had whittled down what I liked and what I knew it should be.
Subconsciously, in a way, like.
Yeah, I think it is. I think it is subconscious. I mean, my mother said that my brother and I were, we were humming traditional songs, or the melodies to traditional songs before we were able to even speak, before we were able to sing them, because we were still too small. And so there's something, I think, I don't know what it is. I mean, you'd have to kind of really study it on a kind of a developmental level, but I mean, or a neurological level maybe. But I mean, there's something about being surrounded by it, quite literally from the womb, that makes it so that it almost becomes part of your nature then to understand traditional songs, or to know what you want to do with them when you find them, or when you love them, how to communicate them. It becomes something that you just do. It's almost like a language that you just learn. Right? That's the part of it that I can't really, I know something happens there in my brain that makes it something that's kind of just in me from such an early age. What that thing is, I wouldn't be able to tell you. I don't quite have that. I can't put it into scientific terms. I can only put it into how I feel terms.
Yeah, that's what we're doing here.
Yeah, absolutely.
No, I was going to ask you, do you ever find it hard to sing about these things that aren't maybe relevant, or not that they're not relevant, but all these old songs from the Irish Celtic tradition, they're usually, well, some of them are about like universal topics, but some of them are set in an environment that are maybe unfamiliar to us in the modern era. Maybe I'm asking this question a bit clumsy, but
I do know what you mean. I think I know what you mean. I think the thing that makes that not the thing that makes that a comfort zone for me rather than foreign territory is I studied as a history student. I did my master's in history, and so I have a master's degree in history, and I have a fair bit of training in understanding sources of the past. And so I've always, not always, but more and more as I've gotten older, and especially after that kind of training and having done that and focused on it and studied it, I've really come to understand traditional songs as historical sources, And so a song about the Napoleonic Wars, while it's not my song, it's not where I'm from. It's not about where I'm from. It's not about something I was involved in. It's not about an event relevant to me or that I have any kind of connection to. It's me as a historian using a traditional song to understand a little bit more, whether it's, on a social history level, or whether it's on a political history level, or whether it's on an economic history level. It's me using a traditional song then to understand the Napoleonic Wars, and or if it's a song about the Irish famine, or if it's a song, I mean, I sing a lot of songs that are about things I know as well. I sing a lot of songs about, Newfoundland history or Canadian history or, North American events. But But in the case of ones that are kind of far from home and you know, that I don't have any kind of family connection to or personal connection to, that's when I kind of step into the shoes of an historian who's basically. And I didn't always realize that's what I was doing. You know what I mean? No. Like I don't think I thought I was doing that when I was 12. I think I just thought, like, what a beautiful song, what a beautiful melody. I love that phrase. I love that phrasing. I love those words. But more and more I've come to realize now that what's drawing me to these songs and what's making them resonate with me is that they're windows into people's lives. They're windows into how people lived, how people loved, how people communicated, how people talked, how people worked. Yeah. You know, labor history. They're windows into you know, if I'm singing a song about, you know, somebody who worked on the water their whole life. Well, you know, I didn't work on the water, and that gives me a glimpse into their type of work, their day to day.
And we can maybe still, like, even though I don't know anything about being a sailor, I can still maybe relate to the emotions of that character in the song.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because
absolutely.
They're
and
universal.
I think, you know, like a lot of those, I often think of like the parallels that because I mean, that's why people love the story. That's why people love storytelling, because in any story, there's going to be something relatable to, you know, to just you as a human being, you know what I mean? Sure. And in the case of, like, there's so many, you know, sea songs about being away at sea and missing home, missing your loved ones at home, missing family or missing your wife or whatever. And there's so many of those songs, and it's you know, obviously to the point where it becomes a cliche, but cliches are fine. And there's, you know, there's so many of those songs that are about that sense of longing. Well, you know, when I became full-time touring musician who had to go away for, you know, weeks and weeks and weeks at a time, then I was able to kind of understand, like, some of those songs actually resonated with me in a little bit of a different way, because I was kind of thinking, this isn't just a cliche. This is a way that people who work away from home feel, you know. This is a way that this is a feeling that they have to grapple with, you know. And you know, I mean, the classic one is, you know, the sailor who's away at sea, because they're typically away for so much longer. Sure. But I mean, there's lots of jobs that take you away from home for longer than you'd like to be. And so then that becomes a bit of a kind of like, those stories tend to kind of resonate with me more, because they draw my attention to something that I'm going through, you know?
Sure. Yeah, and that's also always like a beautiful feeling when you can actually relate to the emotions in the song. That's what does it for me anyway. Like, that's the songs that stick out to me, that I hear over and over and over again, because I feel it's almost about me in to a certain degree. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I think that's why people love traditional music, is because, you know, the target audience becomes anybody who likes a story, who wants to sit and listen to a story. That's quite literally the only criteria to to enjoy it, is to just be somebody who's happy to listen to a story. And you know, I'm the type of person who loves those stories to be put to a beautiful melody, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, there is something relatable in those songs, and I think a lot of people when they're not familiar with traditional songs, and you can tell when they're hearing for the first time that this is a whole genre of music that has something that in it for them that they never knew was there, you know, because they're listening to those songs, and then, because every time, like, I sing songs that come from specific family members, like great grandparents who I never got a chance to know, and I know when people are listening to those songs, they're thinking of the type of lore that they would have gotten from their grandparent or from their, you know, back in their family. And so even just that concept, even if the song itself doesn't have a story that's relatable, I spend a lot of time in my shows talking about how these songs come to me, and how they make their way through people and places to get into my lap, you know. And in a lot of cases, they come from people in my family who I didn't know or barely knew at all, and then got to know them a lot better when I, you know, peel back behind the song to learn about them, because I traced the song back to them. And so even with that idea alone, you can tell when audience members are taking that and saying, oh geez, well, I have family who've given me stories, or they've given me whatever, not necessarily songs, it could be anything. And then they start thinking about the type of things that they've gotten in their own family, and the idea of things being passed down from a previous generation. And so that's a narrative then that becomes relatable, in addition to perhaps.
Yeah, it's relatable on
the narrative.
Several levels in a way, or
yeah, I mean, to me, every song is two narratives, right? It's the story about how the song, how I got the song, where it came from, and why I love it, and all that kind of stuff. But then there's the story within the song, and I always make sure to draw attention to both narratives, because if there's not something in one narrative for an audience member, there's going to be it in the other,
Exactly.
And a lot of times the audience are more interested in the story surrounding the song than they are, like, they're happy that you can sing songs that have lovely melodies and lovely little stories, but in some cases they're even more interested in the idea of the song sharing.
I always love that when I'm on a concert with the folk singer, that they kind of like, as you said, like let me into the history behind the song, maybe how they discovered it, their own relationship to the song perhaps. Right. But I was going to ask you, like, how do you usually go about finding songs, because I've heard some of the songs that you have on your albums sung by other singers, but most of them I haven't really heard.
Good.
So
that's what I like to hear.
I'm curious, like, how, or is it a secret?
No, it's not. The reason it's not anything is because there is no. When it comes to that, I don't really have any kind of process. I get asked that question all the time, and I think one of the reasons people do ask it is because they notice that that it's not necessarily all stuff that they've heard a million times before. A lot of it is kind of, somewhat new old songs, and I love, I should say, I love the standards as much as anybody. I absolutely love singing, the tried and true traditional songs that everybody knows. But when it comes to what I'm going to put my stamp on in the studio, I try to lean towards, songs that I don't think have been heard enough, and that could use another go around. Or songs that haven't been heard at all. I have gotten stuff from within my family. I have gotten stuff from my mother's repertoire, for example, that I've just never found anywhere, which I just think is that excites me, But yeah, there's no real process. I think I live my life on the lookout for songs. Basically, I live my life as a lover of traditional songs and as a lover of songs in general. I'm always on the lookout, or I always have an ear open to songs that could be a Matthew Byrne song somehow. And in most cases it's they're traditional songs, they're old songs, but every now and then there is a kind of a more contemporary song that just becomes part of me, or becomes my own, or I end up developing a connection to, or a connection to the writer or whatever, and it just becomes part of my folk music repertoire, but not necessarily an old song.
No.
But yeah, so there is no real. I don't spend days in archives dusting.
No, that's
off,
what I'm going to ask you. You don't seek out archival recordings, or?
I do. I every now and then I'll find some treasure trove, or I'll find some, and especially now with the online world. You can get lost in rabbit holes and find great songs. I found a few songs for the last record. Or the last couple records, I found a couple songs in the by looking at all of the old Newfoundland and Labrador folk festivals, which were all video recorded in the 70s and early 80s, and they were all digitized and made available through Memorial University in St. John's, Newfoundland, and they were also there's this digital archive where they were all made available online, and I started watching all of these videos and seeing my folks and their contemporaries all singing at these festivals, and just through watching it, I was watching it kind of half for entertainment and half because I was thinking, I'm going to find some stuff here I never heard before. And sure enough, I did, and so, but that was just that wasn't me setting out to see if I could find an archival collection.
But it's like you said, like your mindset is that you're always on the lookout for a good song, like?
No, like my mindset is that I feel like as a lover of it and as somebody who just is, it's part of who I am and what I do. I feel like that part of my ear is always turned on. I wouldn't be able to turn it off if I tried, you know. And so what happens then is you just get songs through living your life, and that's why it takes me so bloody long to amass a collection worthy of bringing to the studio. And it's the reason why there's like 2 and 3 years between my records, you know. And the music industry hates the way, or should anyway, or they should hate the way that I go about it, because it's
but that's something I've been thinking about with both your most recent records. Like there's no fillers there. They're all great songs.
But you know, if I could easily put a few fillers in and have a record out in no time.
yeah, and that's what most people do, I suppose. Like,
yeah, well, I mean, I've always kind of felt that the traditional music world is a little more forgiving than the pop world.
Oh,
when
yeah,
it comes
for sure,
to that.
yeah, definitely.
I mean, well, that's an understatement. It's way more forgiving. I mean, I can last. You know, I can make an album last a bit longer, you know, than I could if I was writing, you know, writing these songs, or if I was in the kind of the pop world, or if I was, you know, folk singer songwriter. I'm able to kind of ride it out a bit more, but I really don't pay attention to. I don't pay enough attention, I guess, to the idea of an album cycle and how come I don't have new material out, and I really feel like if I got hung up on that, and if I was trying to put out a record because of a timeline, then the album would show it. It would suffer, you know. The material would suffer, and it would be, oh yeah, Matthew's last album had 3 or 4 good songs, but I mean, I didn't like it from front to back, you know. Well, no. You wouldn't, because that's I didn't wait until I knew I had 10 to 12 songs that I was equally as excited about, you know. And so there's a stubbornness there with me that it's my own worst enemy sometimes, but it's how I'm doing it, and it's too late for me to change now.
No, but it definitely shows good results. But you have another album in the works, don't you?
I do, yeah. Well, I was supposed to be in the studio in June of this year. I was supposed to be in the studio in Sheffield, England, making a new album that was to be produced by Sheffield folk guitarist, virtuoso Martin Simpson.
All right, nice.
And that has been pushed now, like many, many things in 2020. It's been pushed. I mean, right now it's in the calendar for January 2021, but it's very likely going to get pushed again at the way things are going with travel and everything like that.
Yeah.
So, but it is going to happen. It's just a matter of when. I'm fairly confident it's going to happen next year, but I don't know when next year. But anyway, so that'll be album number 4. And I mean, it's been, you know, Horizon Lines came out in 2017. So like I'm well overdue for a record. Yeah. And I mean, to be fair, I've had the material for this record for at least a year now, you know, and so I'm kind of looking forward to getting to it now, because I feel like, okay, you know, I'm ready to go in the studio. I don't want to wait too much longer. So the only reason now it's being delayed is because of things beyond my control, much like everybody else.
But as I said, I also like the production of your albums.
Thank you.
So I'm just curious, do you collaborate with the same people for every release, or has it been like different sets of musicians and different producers?
No, it's been the same team for all 3, which is why with album number 4 now, I'm finally kind of, you know, really going out of my comfort zone, working with different players, working with a different producer. And you know, and I mean, I think it's time to do that. I really love the idea of a producer and a musician kind of growing together with successive albums, you know. And I think of some of the albums that or some of the musicians that I've followed, the folk singers that I've followed, and I've loved how the relationship they've had with their producer has evolved over time. I think of somebody like when Kate Rusby and John McCusker did several albums together, you know, and it was that partnership that created this sound that she became kind of known for, you know, and I just love that. But I mean, you know, I've done that with 3 albums now.
Yeah.
And so I feel like that's good now. I think audiences now would be happy to see me try something new and work with somebody new and put myself at the mercy of somebody else's
it's a
kind
good
of creative wisdom.
good way to put it. Like
Yeah.
it's kind of scary maybe, like
Very.
because you really have to trust the other person. Like they can really undo all of your good work if they.
Yeah, well, and you really have to trust. I mean, you're taking a chance, you know, and I mean, I worked with a producer. I worked with a producer on all three of my solo albums. His name was Billy Sutton, and I mean, I can't say enough good things about Billy Sutton. He's a brilliant musician and a brilliant producer. He's an amazing. I always say he's an amazing musical mind to have in the studio, and we really kind of developed a great understanding of what each other was trying to do, you know, and I you know, he would nudge me to try he knew when I was ready to kind of be nudged to try something different, and he was ready to try different things himself each time we went into the studio for a new record, you know. And so we made 3 albums that really showed my growth as a musician, but also his growth as a studio ninja, you know. And so, you know, I really love that. And I mean, I had complete trust in him. I had complete trust. I knew that, you know, if I couldn't be there and I said, listen, we're getting such and such in to do a low whistle part on this song, if I could be there, great. It'd be fine. You know, I'd be happy to sit in the chair and just listen to it and maybe make a few suggestions. But if I couldn't be there, I could show up. I knew I could show up after the session, hear what he had taken, hear what he had chosen to use. I might have 2 things I might want to change, 2 minor things I might want to change, but other than that, it was exactly what I wanted because he knew what I wanted and he knew how to get that out of the musician. And so there's a trust there that trickles, a trickle down trust, you know, that goes from me to him to the players and to the people involved. And so throwing yourself into another situation, a different studio, a different producer, somebody who has a different, you know, not everybody has the same level of patience with certain things, you know.
No.
Not everybody, you know, not everybody knows how to communicate as well. Not everybody knows when it's break time. Not everybody, it's just the little tiny things, right?
Yeah.
So like, I'm not even as worried about the music as I am about, like, I want it to be fun and enjoyable. I want it to be a really friendly, kind, peaceful process. And I'm sure it will be, but it's still, it absolutely, it's nerve-wracking.
Yeah, as you said, like, it's really important to establish that trust. Because like I'm a bit of a perfectionist in my own work, and I have like
and it shows, Anders.
Yeah, I'm sure
it's beautiful. It's beautiful.
But I have like a handful of people that I work with in music and also when it comes to video and stuff that I really trust. I trust their like, as you said, I trust them to make decisions without me micromanaging everything, which I always tend to do.
Yeah.
But so it's great when you finally find those people that, okay, I trust that you get what I want, and I know what I can expect from you, and so it's really important to have those relationships. I think
I'm gonna be working. You know, this time around, I'm gonna be working with people who've got an immense amount of studio experience and an incredible skill and all that kind of stuff. And what I need to remind myself of is that it is going to sound a bit different, which was the point. You know, it's not meant to sound just like my other albums, and all 3 of my albums have had, you know, there have been differences musically, you know, a little bit from each one, but generally it's been a type of approach to the songs that I've done with a cast of characters who I've really know well and know what they'll do, and that's good. But you know, in this case, I have to know that I'm going to hear stuff that's going to be like, whoa, that's not what I was expecting, and then I need to realize, but it's not necessarily a bad thing. No, that's a good thing.
No,
I need to
be
like, you know, surprised and interested, and you know, come to love it the same way the listener will, hopefully.
Yeah, and that's where I struggle, because I'm always very skeptical whenever someone pitches a new idea, and I try very hard not to show it, but I know it shows. Like new ideas just takes a little bit of time to develop in my mind.
And I think there's something about the ear of a producer which is a bit different from the ear of just a musician alone. And the people who can do both very well impress the hell out of me, because I don't consider myself I mean, I have good ideas. I have good ideas in the studio. I could certainly, and if you were to give me a kind of an amateur recording artist who hadn't, really recorded much, but had good skill and had good songs, I could produce their music. But I'm at the stage now where, like, okay, if I can do it that well, I want to put myself in the hands of somebody who's like a guru, who's totally, who's just like doesn't question anything about what they do, and then I feel like it's a winning combination then. But yeah, I find myself really impressed by the way these people can. It's almost like they're playing chess with the music. Like they can hear steps ahead,
Yeah.
Like Billy would sit me down and he'd say, okay, well, here's what I'm thinking for this. And I would just because I trust him, but I couldn't understand what he was hearing, but I trust him, And so I would let him go and let him try it. I mean, it's not like you're ever to the point of no return. If you don't like it, well then, you might have lost a few hours, but that's no big deal. You can always turn back. But it would be amazing for me to hear it and think, how did you know that's what that was going to be in your head? Like, I know what my guitar is going to be in my head. I know what my songs are going to be in my head. I know what the bouzouki is going to be like that. But I mean, a producer can take all of these layers, a good producer can take all of these layers and know what they're going to be steps ahead without having heard them yet.
And even like how to record things, like, because that's also a huge part of it. I think, like when it comes to the sound.
Yeah.
Like how, like, is it gonna sound like a more retro thing? Is it gonna be like bright and polished? And that's often thing that musicians struggle to actually verbalize themselves.
Right. And I think that's where the producer is so important, right? Because they can, and Billy would say, Billy would always say, like, well, let's just give it a try, because he knew that he could achieve it. And he knew that if I didn't like it, it was because I just didn't like it. It's not because he didn't get what he was looking for. It's because no, that's not really what I like, But I mean, 99% of the time it would be because he knew my musical mind enough to know where he could reach a bit and which bounds he should stay within, And it's a weird thing to watch somebody. And that's what I always think. I always think of like how a chess player can see moves ahead,
Yeah, that's a good analogy.
Yeah, it's musical chess. It really is, and a good producer can do that very well.
So now I try very hard not to make these shows too nerdy. But could we just talk?
We've already done that.
Well,
absolutely, we've already have.
I was just gonna
but
say.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say if we could just talk briefly about your guitar style. So, like, I mean, I dabble a bit in guitar myself, even though, like, my main background is as a piano player or keys player. But I started playing a bit of guitar lately, and so that's also what kind of interested me with your records, because I think you're a very solid guitar player as well as a singer.
Thank you.
And when I first,
guitar style
sorry, I'm just going to
much,
finish my question. It's a bit long-winded.
Oh yeah, okay.
So when I first started listening to, in the beginning I thought you were playing a lot of fingerstyle, because you don't really strum a lot in the same way I hear like many folk guitar players strum, but you still have like a very crisp sound. So when I watched some videos of you, I realized that you almost always play with a pick. Is that right?
Yeah. I play with a really, really heavy pick. I don't have one with me here now, but it's a very, very heavy pick made by a company called Wegen, Wegen.
Okay.
And they're quite commonly used. I know a lot of people who use.
But you know how thick?
Oh God, I could tell you. I want to say,
just to be even nerdier.
Well, you know what? If we're gonna go nerdy, let's go full on. So let me see, because I ordered them. This is really nerdy. I ordered them from their website or from a music store, and so the little email should tell me which one I ordered.
Like before I got into guitar playing myself, I always hated when guitar players were like discussing picks and like, oh, this is from some rare torches or whatever. But now I'm totally into it.
They can just okay, 2.5 millimeters.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Jesus, that's a heavy pick.
Sorry, you cut out on me there. Say that again.
That's a heavy pick for like 1 millimeter is the heaviest I tend to use when I'm strumming.
It's a very heavy pick. So here's my, I mean, I never thought about what I was doing until people would ask me questions like this. And then you have to realize, okay, well, what am I doing? You know, because you just start doing things that work for you. And then you realize, oh, after years of doing it, I guess it's your style, Dennis.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a 2.5 millimeter pick. It's a really it's a triangular pick. Like it's not that it's not. Here, look. Let's just pause. I'll go grab one. Hang on. Okay. So yeah, it's a 2.5 millimeter pick, and it's there. It is there. It's
so for the YouTube audience,
it's quite thick. And it's got the little groove, the little thumb groove, and it's kind of got these little kind of like these little indents for a little bit of grip on both sides, and it's got a weird kind of bevel around the. I don't know how to show it here. It's got a weird bevel, but basically, if you were to Google Wagon Trimus 250 TRIMU, this is as nerdy as I've ever gotten.
Yeah. We'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah, we'll put it in a promo, and so you'll be able to see a better look at what it is. So I use a really heavy pick, and so I don't strum very much at all. It's finger picking without the fingers. I do add in the fingers.
You do? Okay.
You know what I mean? Like I hold the pick like that, but I will add in these fingers every now and then, and I'll that's something I subconsciously do. I didn't even realize I was doing it until it was pointed out to me. And so my playing or my style is very much, it's very much giving every string its fair play. You know, I really like to let notes ring. I really like a lot of space in my playing. You know, I don't like.
So do you prefer open tunings as well, then maybe?
Yeah. I these days I'm pretty much going between. I play in standard a fair bit, but I go for open tunings. I'm going between drop C, which is C G C G C D.
Okay.
And I do dag gad, and I do. That's pretty much that's the main open tunings that I that I do. Every now and then I'll drop a random string and just kind of find something that works for a song. But those are the three tunings that I'm circulating. Like in an ideal situation for me, I would have 3 guitars on stage. I'd have a standard tune guitar. I'd have my drop C guitar, and I'd have a dag gag guitar. It's I'm very much influenced by. Early on, I was very much influenced by my dad because he was a finger picker and he was a very gentle player. You know, he was also somebody who never strummed the guitar. He played a nylon string. He played a classical guitar, but he played folk music on it, and he was very much a very gentle player. And so I attribute a lot of my, my control, I guess, to him, because he was my first understanding of how a guitar was played, you know, from a really early age. It was watching him play very gently and finger pick and letting, you know, like just in the idea of just individual strings, you know, ringing. And so that's what I got to know. And my brother learned how to play guitar first. And then I kind of learned from my brother before going off and learning myself. And, it's, I don't know. I mean, it's a very, I really like to kind of, I like to have a lot of space, and I like to have the guitar kind of support the song and get in between stuff rather than competing with the song, you know?
Yeah, no, it's really interesting. It's kind of in between listening to someone playing fingerstyle and strumming. That's
yeah. Well, I mean, my guitar is here. This one is in standard tuning, and but I mean, let me try not to get that chord. So it's very much, it's very gentle, and I try to be as steady as I can, but even like whenever there is space, I kind of I never let it die too much, but almost let it die so that it's never like jarring with a song, because the song has words, and I don't want the things I'm doing. What I'm doing is quite busy, but if I do it, if I place it right, it will never jar against the song,
No.
And so yeah, it's a weird kind of interplay between the two that I try to get right, so that the song comes first and the guitar comes second. And I want the guitar playing obviously to be on display, but I don't want it to be on display in such a way where the song falls victim to it. You know?
Do you find it hard to sing when someone else is playing the guitar?
I don't know if I've ever done it.
No.
apart from when I was little and my dad used to play and sing.
Because I'm guessing the two are so linked in the way you play.
Yeah, like the way I play guitar is like it's almost like the guitar is the other singer of the song,
Yeah.
And so it's almost like they, they're meeting. They're meant to meet and mesh perfectly. And so, geez, I don't know if I do play in a band, a 5-piece group called the Dardanelles, and so there's, but I mean, typically if we're playing a song, there's a kind of a steady beat, and the guitar is kind of following a rhythm. So it's kind of foolproof, but in terms of somebody playing like that and me singing over it, I don't know if I'd be any good at it.
No, yeah, well.
I really don't, because I'm so used to what I do being kind of subconsciously woven into the song, that if somebody else did it, I'd be like, no, don't do it there, because I'm phrasing that longer there, And so yeah, there's a lot of stuff that for me is, I use the word subconscious because it's the only way I can describe some of those things that I just do without thinking,
So I see we're closing an hour now, so I'm not going to take up your whole day with this nerdy
It doesn't
chat.
take long. It doesn't take long to fill an hour when you start going down those rabbit holes, especially when you get nerdy.
Oh yeah. But I was just gonna ask, like, how's these last 4 to 6 months been for you? Like, since the world collapsed in March, have you been able to do anything musically at all?
It's been very difficult. It's been, in some ways for me in my life, it's been the best thing ever, while in other ways it's been the worst thing ever. I have a 8-month-old little boy.
Nice.
And so this whole COVID-19 situation unexpectedly has allowed me to be home for the entire first year of his life, which was never something I thought would be the case, and I spent so much of last year, or so much before he was born, when we found out about him coming along, I spent so much of that time mentally preparing myself for something that I was going to have to do, that so many people have to do, and kind of goes back to what we were talking earlier about those people being away at sea, missing home, this whole idea of working away from him and being away when he's so young and not seeing certain firsts, in his early year. And I haven't had to miss anything, and so it's, in that respect, it's been amazing, because I've been able to focus on family, and I've been able to kind of step away from work to focus on him, and to focus on family, and to focus on, adjusting to this brand new world of fatherhood, which has been an absolute blessing. But, there's also the other side of the coin, which is the uncertainty of all of this, and when am I going to work again? Where am I going to be able to work again? When am I going to be able to travel again? When am I going to be able to make this record?
That's the worst part, isn't it? Like, the uncertainty. Yeah, exactly. Like, if someone had told me, like, everything will be miserable until Christmas, then it will be fine. Like, we could have been able to cope with that, but since we don't know, like, this might last 6 months or 6 years, who knows? Like it makes it so hard.
And that's the hard part, is the uncertainty now, because I mean everybody's kind of preparing for this, you know, when it's gonna take its second wave and where that's gonna be most severe. The hard part for me is that, unlike so many other people, because of you know, becoming a dad and having so much to do in that regard, I haven't been able to just set up shop and do the digital output, you know, thing the way I probably could have otherwise. You know, I have so many friends who've taken advantage of that, and they've kept their brand as out there as strongly as ever, you know, and they've been putting out music, and they've been recording at home and all this kind of stuff. I tried to do a little bit of that early on, and when he was really, really young, and I just couldn't do it.
No.
and I just wasn't enjoying it, because I was trying to fit it into such an already exhausting day, you know? And so finally I just kind of said, no, I'm going to step away from everything now, and I'm going to step back, and I'm not going to be on the radar for a while, and I'm going to have to be okay with that. You know, you kind of have to, there was a bit of kind of self-care that had to come into place for me, where I had to kind of say, I can't let the pressure to put stuff out there, even though I kind of still could in a different way. I can't let that pressure bother me. And if it works for other people, that's great. It's not working for me this year. It will eventually. And so I needed to just kind of really kind of put my foot down for myself, and kind of step away and say, yeah, you're taking a break. You're taking some family time, and you're not going to be apologetic about it. And I had to kind of give myself a stern talking to, you know.
Sounds like a wise choice. It's something about like saying those things to yourself, like this is how it's going to be, and being okay with that. Because I think, as you said, I think many people feel the pressure to like, and we're all on social media constantly, so we're seeing, it looks like everyone else is being super productive all the time, and we feel bad, like, oh, well, we need to like have all of these projects going and record songs and post, like.
Yeah. And I have the ability. I mean, I have the, you know, I've got a decent recording setup, and I've got some gear that I've invested some money and some time into, but it's going to have to wait. It's going to have to wait until I can do it and enjoy it, because if I'm doing it under the gun and just succumbing to the pressures that I see to kind of, you know, keep up with everybody else.
But I think that's the important part, like not to try to keep up with everyone else, but just like focus on oneself and what's right for oneself in the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think then you start to think, okay, well, what's it going to do to my career? Like, you know, you know, how our promoter is going to see that, and blah, 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 blah. But you just can't think about that. You just gotta, you know, I think what'll happen is that it'll give me a chance to step away and take a break. And then I'll go back at it with a new project, which I'm incredibly excited about. It's going to be fresh and new. It's going to be, you know, it's going to be very much not this day-to-day kind of in waiting. It's going to be new. Every day is going to be a different world. And I think the incitement of that, and the joy of doing it after having a much needed break, is going to make what I make better. It's going to make my musicianship better. It's going to make me more enjoyable to listen to. It's going to make me more excited to record. It's going to make the songs better, you know. And so I think the benefit of that self-care remains to be seen, but I think it'll be seen, and I think I'll be glad that I did it, you know, that I was able to step away, and that I forced myself to do so. And because the internet is a brutal place. You can really you can really start to think that you're the only one lagging behind, and maintaining that perspective that everybody is only showing their best side, you know, because who's going to go on and show that? Nobody really wants to show what they're struggling with. And maintaining that perspective is it's hard when, you know, when times get tough.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy when you think about that. Like when we're just scrolling through the highlights of everyone else's lives, like it has to do something to your brain or your like self-esteem. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, that's there's challenges with that for me. On two levels, because I mean, it's okay. Everybody's being an amazing musician who's who's pivoting with this whole thing and doing something different and unique and creating from their home and making homemade albums of this incredible music, blah 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 blah, home videos and all this kind of stuff. And then there's also like, oh, everybody's such an amazing new dad. Everybody's got it figured out. You know?
It goes
everybody
on
has
all levels of
fatherhood right
life.
under their thumb.
Yeah.
Right? and so I'm looking at that and I'm kind of thinking, okay, I need to shut this off, because this is just like, this is just capitalizing on me being in a bit of a weaker place right now and making me think that I'm the only one in that situation, and you're absolutely not the only one. So I've kind of said, you know what, if this is going to have a negative effect on my brand or on my following, I don't think it will in the long run. I think everybody understands that you do what you do for you, and family comes first, and that's, if you're going to put anything first and step aside for any reason, that's the most legit reason to do it. So, definitely. It'll work. I try not to get too worried about it. And just hope that it'll, I mean, there's kind of power in numbers with it in this weird way where, like, when it first came on and when this first started to happen and,
You mean the
tours were
pandemic?
being canceled and gigs were being canceled, I found myself kind of like, well, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? I'm a self-employed musician. Like, I can't, but then within 48 hours, I was like, okay, wait now, I'm one of billions of people who are going to be in this situation,
Which is kind of comforting in a way.
It is comforting in a way.
Like that, even that the two of us can bond over this thing, like over the Atlantic is.
Yeah. It's almost like a misery loves company kind of thing, Yeah. But how are you finding it, Anders? Like, I mean, you have a fair bit more skill and ability in terms of the home studio side of things by the look of it. So you're fairly self-sufficient, eh?
Yeah, so I suppose I have like some strengths there to play off. Like, but I've been fairly active on like social media and the internet for a few years now. Like building my brand, if you will,
right?
In that way. So for me, it has mainly been like a continuation of what I was already doing.
Right.
But obviously, all my gigs are cancelled, which is a huge problem because that's where I got the majority of my income.
Right.
But things are starting to kick off again now, so I'm optimistic, but it's definitely been. And like you said, like the beginning, it was a bit crazy because everyone was okay. Now everything has to be online. Like you have to like churn out videos and like start Patreon accounts and crowdfunding and like find your audience online, blah blah blah.
Yeah.
But in the end, I think it's so important, like you said, like to figure out, okay, what's right for me? What do I want to do in this situation? And try not to get carried away with what everyone else is doing. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, and I think, it's been tricky. It's been tricky a bit for me because I'm not, in terms of like the online thing. I mean, I'm not one of those people who's really, really, really present on social media. I everybody who I work with in terms of promoters and managers and anybody, they're always saying, oh, you need to do more of this, you need to do more of this. It's not really me. It's not really I don't mind putting stuff out that I can polish and make as presentable as possible, but in terms of just kind of off the cuff daily life kind of stuff, it's just never been me. And and so I was already kind of like, oh man, like I really should be doing more of this social media stuff. I was already kind of feeling that way before this whole COVID situation. And then this happened and I was like, well, now it's the only way. It's the only option. It's the only thing you can do. And I'm definitely not going to do it now because I'm so preoccupied by life and this new world I'm getting used to and family and all this kind of stuff. So I've really just kind of had to say, okay, well, that's not how it's going to be for me. And if that's going to put limitations on my, if that's going to put limitations on my brand or my reach, well, it's in the interest of mental health, it really is. And so you do what's comfortable for you, And I mean, I do plan on doing some stuff. But there's still going to be time. I feel like I feel like the you know, I didn't do an online concert until, you know, about 3 months into this, and I'm kind of glad that I almost waited until that wave of people being flooded with online stuff, kind of, you know, because it really was there was a real kind of peak in it there for
comedic
a while, you know?
in hindsight.
Yeah, it's kind of, and I waited until I watched a bunch of people to see, okay, how do you actually do this, you know, like, and I managed to take the time to try to make it sound and look a bit better than if I had went at it right away, you know. But yeah, patience is a virtue with this kind of thing, I think. Sure. And right now,
but like speaking, speaking not only to you but to any listener who might be feeling the same way as you do, like, I mean, I used to hate social media until like 3 years ago, maybe. I mean, I had a Facebook account that I only used to stalk old classmates, and the same thing as you, like, I could never see myself just like sharing random bits of my life and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But for me, like, what made me like go all in is that I just found a way to do it in my way, I think, that I was comfortable doing. And maybe I feel like we're a bit similar in that I also want things to be a bit polished and nice looking.
Yeah.
So that's kind of been a part of my brand the whole way, I think. Like, I put a bit of extra time and attention to the details. And that probably make it so that I can't push out as much as other people, but at least it's me still. I feel like it's me and I can stand for it. Whereas if you feel like, okay, this is not me, I'm just posting a selfie because my producer told me, then people are going to see through that, and it's not going to work, I think.
And I think because I don't do stuff, you know, every hour on the hour or geez, every day or every week, you know, and there's nothing wrong with doing that. I'm not criticizing the people who do. I mean, if you're comfortable doing that or if you're good at that, I think it's a skill. I think some people are just better at it. They're better at capturing stuff and not having it be a big hang up that's going to take 2 hours of their day, you know. But I think because I've kind of cultivated a situation where I'm, you know, my output is kind of sparse, but when I do put something out there, it's got a little bit more kind of thought into it, maybe. It means that the stuff I am putting out there is, you know, it's resonating a bit more and it's getting a bit more traction, you know. I mean, and there becomes a bit of a kind of the boy who cried wolf syndrome when with the social media thing, where, you know, if you know you can see somebody all the time, you know, it's kind of like when I used to play the bars downtown in St. John's, you know, where I grew up, and I spent about 3-4 years doing that, you know, and it was great and I loved it, and it was fun, and I was, you know, newly out of school and didn't have any, you know, real expenses, and I was able to just play the bars and have fun, and it was a phase of my life, you know. But it was never going to be something that I wanted to base a career on, because I realized very quickly that the idea of being able to see somebody anytime, week to week to week to week, in the same place, is not going to give you any value, you know, and it's not going to allow you to eventually ask for more money or kind of, you know, be a bit more of a brand that people want. It's just all it's going to do is just keep you in a gig, you know. And so I kind of see some of the social media stuff, for me anyway, as a similar kind of thing, you know. I mean, if I'm doing it all the time and people know that they can tune into me whenever they want, it's not going to give a lot of what I put out there any credence, you know.
No, I think that's the main challenge with that whole online thing. Like, you have to do a certain amount of stuff to keep yourself relevant, but at the same time you have to find a way to hold something back. Otherwise, why would they pay to buy from your, like,
exactly.
go to concert?
And I feel like for me, I'm a bit more comfortable with a less is more approach, and other people have capitalized on doing the polar opposite. And so it all depends on what you're good at and where. Like you said, you know, find what works for you, and then it'll show you. It'll showcase you. You know. Anyway, we could go on for forever.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm not going to keep you a whole day. But despite you saying that you haven't been that active on the internet lately, like, if people want to learn more about you and your music, where's the best place to do that?
I mean, I've always made sure to keep the website very up to date and relevant to where I am in my career. You know, I'm a website guy. I when I want to learn about somebody, I like to go to their website first. It's still not my knee-jerk reaction to go check somebody's Instagram first, even though it probably should be, because it's more kind of current. But anyway, so yeah, you can find out about all my official information on my website, and on my website there's also a little thing on the contact page where you can just email me directly. I love hearing from people. I think that's just more of a real way to interact with people. I love when people reach out with comments or questions or things that they were touched by or whatever, you know. And so but to be honest now, there is some revamping of that I have to do, because I do have a live album that we've taken a recording and turned it into a live album that is ready to be released now this fall. And so I'm going to start kind of doing some more social media stuff around that to kind of let people know that's just about ready to go out into the world. And so, you know, you can find me on Facebook, you can find me on Twitter, you can find me on Instagram. And, but you know, like, as you've probably guessed, you're not seeing a whole lot from that these days, but I'll get back at it a bit more.
Nice.
When I find that I'm way more active on those things when I'm actually working, like, you know, when I'm either recording or touring. As soon as I'm not, I kind of step away from it as part of stepping away from, you know, from the job, right?
But I'm happy you took the time to speak with me today.
Thanks so much, man. It was great to chat. I'd love to collaborate if I'm ever over in your part of the world, and I hope one day you'll find yourself over here sometime.
Definitely. I'll make sure you get some gigs in Norway when this whole thing is over.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you're looking to play anywhere in Newfoundland, you just let me know. I'll make it happen.
Sounds great. Take care.
Right on. Thanks, Anders.
See you. Thanks for listening to this week's episode of the Folk Music Podcast. As usual, if you want to learn more about the show, you can visit the show website at thefolkmusicpodcast.com. There you'll find additional information about each episode, with links to various resources and video clips and things like that. You can also follow the show on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube at the moment, so hope to see you there as well. And finally, I would highly encourage all of you to go out and check out Matthew's music if you haven't done so already, because, as I said, I think it's pretty amazing. That's it for this week's episode. I hope you have a great week, and I'll see you all very soon for the next episode of the Folk Music Podcast. Take care.